4 years ago, I found myself in a horrifying situation that could have easily been my last night alive. This is what happened. I was 15 at the time and one of the only sophomores on varsity cheer. We had a team-building getaway scheduled, and my parents agreed to pay for half the cost. To earn the rest, I decided to start a dog walking business. I found an image of a morbidly obese dog, added a cute photo and my contact information, and printed out a couple hundred copies. I then walked down every street and cul-de-sac in my middle-class neighborhood, putting the flyers into mailboxes. It was several miles of walking, and it took me the entire day, but it paid off immediately. By the time I got back to my parents' place, 2 of my neighbors had already inquired about hiring me. That night I got a text from another neighbor. She said her name was Louisa and wanted to hire me to give her dog Missy a daily walk starting that very night. We negotiated a monthly rate, and then I headed over to the address she gave me. It was dark by the time I got to the location, and I was glad to find the house was well lit and cozy. I was about to knock on the door when I got a text. It was Louisa correcting the address. Apparently there was a typo in the earlier message, and I was at the wrong place. I used Google Maps to look up the new address, got my bearings, and then backtracked halfway across the neighborhood to the correct location. This time the house wasn't so inviting. From the street it looked empty. There was no car in the driveway, no lights on inside the house. The grass was overgrown and the garbage can wasn't on the curb like all the rest. The only clue that anyone even lived there was the yellow glow of the porch light. I was anxious as I approached, but I saw a car pull into a nearby house and I could hear a basketball game playing on the TV next door. Something about these everyday activities gave me a false sense of security. As I neared the door, I noticed there was a note taped to it. It said, "Front door jammed, walk around back." There was something familiar about the image bleeding through the paper, and I flipped it over to see it was my dog walking flyer. That should have been a red flag that something was off, but instead it put my mind at ease. It confirmed that I was at the right place, Louisa's house, where I was going to walk her dog Missy. I turned on my phone light and started walking around to the back of the house. It was dark and I was cautious to avoid stepping onto any doggy bombs, but I didn't see any. When I got to the side of the house, there was a gate that was in pretty bad shape. One of the hinges was broken and it wouldn't swing open. I gave it a couple of tugs and forced it open just enough for me to squeeze past. The backyard was in need of a mow and I stayed on the lookout for dog waste. But Louisa was much better about caring for her dog than caring for her yard. There was a screened-in pool that was surprisingly well maintained. I walked over to the sliding glass door and saw there weren't any lights on inside the house. I put my phone light against the glass and peered inside. I couldn't see anything other than furniture. The couches were covered in sheets, but I just assumed they were protecting them from the dog. I was about to try knocking when my phone buzzed. I had a pair of texts from Louisa. They said, "Come inside, the sliding door is open." I stepped in and called out hello. The place was pitch dark. I shined my light around the room and found a light switch on the wall and flipped it on. Nothing happened. Then a woman's voice called from across the house, instructing me to come into the garage and meet Missy. I asked if she could just bring the dog out here. The woman then responded that the dog was in her crate and she wanted me to meet her before she let her out. Again, I don't know why, but I started going toward the voice. I could see a partially separated kitchen, a dining room, and a door to the garage. I remember walking into the kitchen and thinking, I should go home and get my dad, and then it hit me. I realized my parents didn't know where I actually was. They didn't have the updated address. I went to send them a text and my light shined on something up ahead. It was the front of what appeared to be a heavy work boot, sticking out beyond the edge of the pantry wall. I shined my light directly on it, and then it moved. I realized that someone was standing there waiting for me. I backed away slowly and then ran to the sliding glass door and out of the house. I rushed through the pool area, careful not to slide on the wet concrete, then ran through the side yard and started across the front lawn. I glanced back at the house just in time to see a man in a dirty jacket rushing out of the front door toward me. If I had been just a second slower, I think he would have caught me, but I made it to the sidewalk and I ran down the street screaming for help as I went. I rushed into an intersection where a car was at a stop sign and desperately waved it down. I hopped inside and yelled for him to go. The man drove off and I looked back in the direction of the house. I didn't see the man who was chasing me or anyone else. The stranger drove me home and I explained to him what had happened. My parents called the police and officers were sent to investigate. They determined that squatters had broken into an unoccupied home, that the messages were sent from a texting app, and that there never actually was a dog. I was pretty shaken up by what had happened, and I had a hard time sleeping for months. Sometimes I still have nightmares and anxiety about it all, and I will never forget the terror I felt when I saw that boot slide back out of view.